called Incomplete Statements. Do you see everything you receive from Gaza? All those heartbreaking images and reports? All that pain that changed the lives of generations and shaped their opinions? None of that is enough to truly describe the experience of Gaza genocide. What you receive is an incomplete experience, odorless, emotionless, and tasteless. And most importantly, when it reaches you, it has already happened and ended. So there is no fear of the future or pain of the event itself. The human minds cannot smoothly comprehend genocide and arrive at a way to deal with the state of survival day after day, nor can it remember the momentous event that a person experienced as an abstract result without recalling all the surrounding factors and elements that they experienced. For example, I cannot remember that in October 2023, I was displaced in a Shifa hospital in Gaza City only. I remember that I was displaced under a tree with my family without a roof, and that the first showers of rain that fell on my body that year at dawn, one October day, were like electric shocks through my skin, and that my back ached as I slept on a piece of cardboard on the dry, muddy ground, and the stench of the dead that emanated from the morgue due to the number of martyrs exceeding the hospital's capacity. This stench accompanied my path from the hospital garden to one of its bathrooms to wash my face every morning. The smell of gas and gunpowder accompanied me every night before I went to sleep, and that I was immersed in my fear and lost in the thought of tomorrow more than any fear in my life. Of all the above, the only thing you've heard is that I was displaced in a hospital with 60,000 others, and that the humanitarian conditions were dire, and that's it, end of statement. This, dear reader, is the flaw, and iconic at the same time, in the human experience. Each of us experiences it differently, so I can't describe it as if you were actually experiencing it. Therefore, you will never truly experience living through genocide, and the statement will forever remain incomplete. For the record, all the above descriptions of the situation were based on just one factor. Imagine the infinite number of events experienced by 2 million people over the course of 630 days. Dear reader, I don't know if I'll be alive when you read this text, but I am certain that the issue I'm talking about is alive and will never die, alive until the end of the world or the end of the occupation. My name is Bisan. My father named me Bisan after a city he had never seen before, and neither had I. It is located in northern Palestine and was occupied by Zionist gangs after massacring some of its people and displacing the others in 1948. However, I am from a beautiful village called Bet Hanun in the northern Gaza Strip. Hanun is the anemone flower, and it's aptly named. My passion in life is telling stories, the same stories that the occupation is trying to erase, because my people are alive and will not die, and because my land will reject its occupier, even if it takes 1,000 years. Then our stories must be preserved and protected, awaiting the land and its people. But the stories I used to tell before the genocide about heritage, culture and history were no longer a priority with a monster tearing our cities and bodies apart. I found myself working as a journalist, sending all these incomplete statements that only documented my people's suffering in audio and video. In fact, the subject of my writing for this book was different from this title, but I changed it at the last moment when I began to notice that I wake up from my sleep to the strong smell of blood lingering in my nostrils. And each time I woke up startled, I found myself in my bed with no blood around me. But it was the same smell that lingered in my nostrils on June the 30th, 2025, after the Baka Cafe massacre, which I went to document, and to stop the feeling within me that I knew one of its victims. It occurred to me, do your senses forget? Do you really receive our complete stories? Or are they just data devoid of most of our tragedy and all of our humanity? Will the bodies of Gazans ever forget the exhaustion that resembles the slow death of body cells, which follows the displacement process, with all its burdens of fear, illness, hunger, despair, responsibility, and choices that can mean life or death under the whiz of tank bullets, bombs, missiles, or small quadcopters? capable of displacing or annihilating an entire country, operated by remote control from a distance like a child's game. But killing does not restart the game. And of course, this displacement will be the 10th or more on the 500th day of the genocide. And the fact that Gazans may be carrying sick, wounded and orphans and walking in a dust of roads crushed by bulldozers and among piles of rubble 2 or 3 floors high in the midday temperature of 38 degrees. Will the bodies of Gazans ever forget this? What is enough to document this suffering, other than that others live it with all the pain it entails, and the wish that no one will ever experience what we have experienced? I didn't have the right answer until June 30th, 2025. I thought that if I documented each individual suffering and then told you to combine all these factors, the result would be sufficient to describe this hideous hybrid, the ugliest thing humankind has ever created. But I was wrong. I can't force the smell of blood into your nostrils while you sleep, just as I can't force the terror into your throats as you search among the victims' names for a friend or family, until you reach the end of a list that seems 77 years long. The correct answer is no. What the Gazans experience cannot be conveyed to you by any means, but it can be described as uglier than the ugliest thing imaginable. But why am I interested in conveying our experience to you as closely as possible? The questions whose answer has changed several times since I began my work in the field, from the first day of the genocide non-stop until now. One of the answers was my faith in the world and humanity. I used to say to myself, it is impossible for anything worse to happen. It is impossible for the genocide to continue after the massacre at Al-Ahli hospital, or for the terrorist Israeli army to occupy the Gaza Strip. It is impossible for them to force 2 million people to live in the rubble. How could that happen? We are 8 billion people, but all of that happened 100 times over. Later, one of the answers was, the crimes must be documented and our stories conveyed to the world so that the occupation is punished. Yet the whole world must see that doctors are killed, journalists are killed, mothers are killed, children are killed, patients are burned, tents are burned, displaced people are burned, children are beheaded, citizens are buried alive, and tanks drive their chains over entire families to obscure human features and turn them into nothing. I thought that this would contribute to holding the occupation accountable. But the world's tolerance and its familiarity and normalization with our killing were increasing tremendously, like arrows aimed at the sky falling towards us in the end. Until the reason I am desperate to tell you what is happening in Gaza is my anger that explodes in my body like a carpet bombing perpetrated by the rabid terrorist army, the Israeli army. I do not want to die without a voice. My people do not deserve this humiliating death. I am knocking on the walls of these death tanks so that no one will come years later and say what Abu al-Khazouran said when he saw the bodies of 3 men in a novel, Men in the Sun, by the Palestinian writer Hassan Kanafi. Why did you knock on the walls of the tanks? After all this, does any of what we're doing, our sacrifice, our steadfastness, our reporting of the truth, your rising up and stepping out of the bubble of the Zionist occupation narrative and into the terrifying truth work? I have 2 answers, and each depends on you. The first is that Gaza is a test of humanity, the edge of a world collapsing like a tower of straw beneath which water slowly trickles. This is not a war against Palestine and the extermination of the people of Gaza. Rather, it is a war against human values and norms, against human consciousness and nature. It seeks to engineer defeat and submission, to separate us from one another, and to divide our great suffering under colonialism, exploitation, and capitalism into smaller sufferings of individuals and peoples. To deal with each people separately, to defeat and crush it, while the other silently looks on, afraid of whetting the appetite of the beast. This war has been fueled and continues to be fueled by global fascism, which seeks to enter your home with fire and iron, threatening you with becoming a victim of one of its monsters. None of us is safe if we are not all safe, and no one is free. if we are not all free. Everything else is just petty, cowardly arguments and attempts by us to convince ourselves to believe in this global system based on robbing individuals and peoples, enriching the rich and impoverishing the poor, and taking pleasure in our suffering. Therefore, your victory for a free Palestine is precisely your victory for yourself, your peoples, and your humanity. Therefore, our resistance in all its forms is a continuous benefit and serves our supreme goal: liberation from the shackles of occupation. The second is that this genocide may stop or slow down so that you may believe through deceptive media and propaganda efforts that it has ended and that your role in it has ended. Therefore, it is likely that you will reduce all our lost lives and our bodies into that occupation, and before your eyes is consciously cut into parts to a few memorials, slogans and songs. Then the world will return to zero, lost from its nature, sacrificing its noblest peoples and causes for the sake of base pleasures, avoidable ignorance, and some comfort zones. While the oppressors will not return to zero, as they have learned the extent of the world's tolerance and its habits of massacres. Therefore, they will begin the next massacre from where they left off in the previous one. And they will do so, for the colonialism does not end on its own, nor does it stop expansion, but rather it ends with true liberation, memory, anger, persecution, accountability, the pursuit of justice, and the rejection of half measures. Since I am writing this now while being hungry, I have experienced every form of death in addition to 20 displacements, loss and injustice, and I am still writing. It is clear which of the two answers I am leaning toward and striving for. A genuine people never loses hope, and no one dies before fulfilling their mission in the world. Therefore, I will continue to work, and we will continue to persevere. Even if the occupation lasts 80 years and has failed to wipe us out thus far, there must be another opportunity. Do not forget, do not forgive. Between us and them are thousands of corpses and screams, rivers of children's blood and mountains of rubble from our homes. This is my message. I will strive until justice is achieved, until Palestine, from the river to the sea, is free. And so will you. Free, 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 free. Let us never forget.